Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Natasha Kipper, and I'm the Training Services Manager for Cubic AMF. I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. The majority of bowling and entertainment centers in the country are still closed. We know most of you are just trying to figure out what is best for your business and make sure you take care of your family, employees, and yourself. Nonetheless, we want to assure you there's a light at the end of this coronavirus time. If you have the capacity to do so, our goal today is to make sure we're here to help you get back into your center and offer advice and guidance on how you can be proactive and take advantage of a closed center. Hopefully very soon, we'll be discussing how to prepare for the opening of your center. But for now, let's talk about those items that we have been putting off until, we have more time, or as soon as the league season is over, and so on. We all have been there. We get so busy that some things just naturally slip through the cracks, so to speak. While we know there are likely still many things on your list of priorities, we have invited seasoned proprietors to share what they are doing in their own centers and offer their advice on how you can, of what you can do to get yourself and your staff prepared for when the business opens. Kathy, Dorian, Lizzie of Sandusky Star Lanes and Star Lanes at the Harbor has graciously agreed to join us today and share her wealth of knowledge and experience in owning and operating a bowling center. Kathy is a district sales manager at Cubic AMF and also a pro bowler who has won multiple national titles as a member of the PWBA. She's incredibly knowledgeable about the business as well as the sport of bowling. And I'm so excited for Kathy to join us today and share some of the knowledge with you all. Also with us today, we have Brian Kane, our seasoned panelist. Brian is the senior scoring technology expert and has been working with Cubic AMF systems and equipment for over 25 years. He owns and operates his own center in Pennsylvania, and much like Kathy, has a vast amount of industry experience as well as the systems knowledge. Brian has been in the bowling industry for over 30 years and has been an invaluable asset to our company as well as our customers and bowling community. And today we also have a special guest, Joe Bullis. Joe is currently the Assistant Product Manager for Aftermarket Products. He has been with Cubic AMF for almost 15 years and has spent most of that time as a tech support supervisor. Joe has had a very long and active career in the bowling industry. For over 40 years, he has owned and managed bowling centers, operated pro shops, have worked on Brunswick and AMF equipment, and also had been a competitive bowler for many, many years. We're very happy Joe is able to join us today as he also brings a wealth of knowledge and experience. Over the past few weeks, we have shared several resources to help our customers and industry partners navigate this uncharted territory. From dedicated resource page on our corporate website, webinars, Facebook Live events, interviews with proprietors and industry leaders, and so on. In addition to this, the BPAA and IAPA have shared a lot of the resources through their channels as well. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to take advantage of those resources. Today, I want to start our conversation by asking Kathy and Brian, how have your centers been impacted so far, and what are some of the initiatives you have done along the way? Ladies first, Kathy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course.
So what we've done is when we first got over the initial shock that we had to close our businesses, it's a sad day when that has to happen, because even though bowling happens to be the small fish in a big pond of sports, to the bowling industry, we're huge, and we're huge to a lot of people. This has to become a new normal now for us. I hate that term, but I think it's going to be.
Right.
My staff is doing fabulous. They're all on unemployment. We could not keep anybody. I'm very lucky. My husband and my brother-in-law are very hands-on. So like 90% of the bowling centers that are closed, They are doing all the projects that you mentioned that could put off because of busy league seasons, or we just don't have time from our main season, which is September to May. You know, we make sure that we're adjusting our lanes, our bumpers. We did strip our lanes because we have wood lanes in one center and synthetic in another, but we just totally believe that, you know, oil attracts dirt. And the more dirt that will be applied on the lane because of some of the maintenance projects that you're doing, that could cause problems with your machine and cleaning later on when you go to redress the lanes. We are checking and cleaning our approaches. We're regulating our thermostats, like those little things for energy savers, consolidating our prep tables, cleaning and organizing our dry storage rooms. And obviously, please, everybody out there, do your inventory. Please make sure that you're buying product that you absolutely need, but do not buy if you have a large amount of product left over. Changing the lights, LED updates, painting. We're doing all these projects because when we reopen, we still want to be a welcoming facility. So now is the best time for proprietors, which they already know this, is to use their time wisely to make sure that when we reopen, and we will, that we are ready to do business better than ever. Business may be slow and it's going to be scary. This is a scary time for us. But I think business can be done better because we'll have to be better. But I think presentation of your center will be huge as soon as the people come back, and they will come back.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Kathy. I agree with you 100%. We think even more people are going to be so mindful of their environment and cleanliness of the center and all those things that you have mentioned. So thank you so much for sharing that. Brian, how about you? What do you have going on?
Building on a lot of the things Kathy said, a lot of the big things that we've been concentrating on is cleanliness. That's a big thing. But my center, to be honest with you, has always been very clean. We hear that from almost every customer that walks in the door. But even so, there's still a lot of areas that sometimes get overlooked, especially down back. So our mechanics area, our pit areas, and things of that nature, we've really concentrated a lot on that. We have put off for the last year or two. I have an older building, and we have put off some plumbing things that we needed to address. We have some very hard water, so we have a lot of older copper lines in the facility, and we've wanted to, for the last couple of years, we really wanted to replace some of that piping. But because of the fact of being open and worrying about whether or not we would have water, you know, available at the time for the customers, we just kept putting it off. So we found this to be the perfect time, and actually in the last couple of weeks, we've ended up replacing almost all of our water pipe plumbing in the facility since we've been closed. So a lot of the things that you put off because you're either busy or you got other things going on when the center is running and busy, we're actually trying to now use some of this downtime to make sure that we get some of these things done so that when the center opens, we really can concentrate on the customers and the customers coming in and really showing them the customer service they deserve and are looking for, rather than having to be concerned about anything in the facility breaking down or having an issue. You know, the last thing that I want is to be closed for, 6-8 weeks, reopen for business, and then customers start bowling and now I have issues with, on the lanes or anything else. It just looks like we didn't really care about what was going on. So we really want to touch on all the pieces that are going to affect our customers so that when they do come back in, they have a great experience.
Very nice. Thank you, Brian, for sharing that. Sounds like you're knocking out some very big projects. Good for you. That's awesome. Let me go back to Kathy. Kathy, you mentioned stripping lanes, foul lights, LED lights. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the best practices related to maintenance and upkeep of the center that our customers can focus on during this downtime? What else can they be doing? Kathy, if you're talking and you're muted, we cannot hear you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I think what we need to do is we need to put a big focus more on the sanitation areas in the bowling center as well, making sure that the sinks have all the sanitary products needed for your employees to constantly being allowed to wash their hands, as well as your mechanic and your customers in the restrooms. As of today, my husband and my brother-in-law are remodeling the one restroom and making it into a dry storage room. That's the center that we turned into an FEC. So we've had a lot of reconstruction over there. What I think centers need to focus on is just making sure that your center is going to be safe as well as looking good. And we're all going to be clean. But I think, you know, when you show you care about your business, it shows you care about your customer. So even changing a light bulb, making the restrooms look nice and keeping everything sanitized, safe and clean, it shows a lot of your character as an owner of a bowling center, but it also shows that you care about your customers. And you want your customers in there feeling comfortable and safe so they know they want to be back and spending their money there. We just do a lot of things. We unplug our lane machine. It's a battery operated Kegel ion machine. You know, it saves on the wear and tear. A lot of the maintenance things that we're doing they're just a lot of the manual labor things, fixing our bumpers, cleaning the gutters, sanding the approaches, making sure the lane panels are intact. I mean, you just want to make sure everything's ready to go. And also, you know, we donated a lot of our food to a grab and go to our local hospital because we wanted to make sure we didn't have any product sitting, gave it to our employees. So there's so many things that go into just fixing a bumper that is broken to really revolutionizing your center to get it back up and operating correctly.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing this. I do admire your motivation and positivity. Being able to focus on the things you can control versus, you know, panicking about everything else that is out of your control, which, you know, I'm sure that was the initial reaction for so many people, myself included, and being able to focus on working towards improving parts of your business, I'm sure is going to be very beneficial for you as well as everybody else who is doing it. So thank you a lot for sharing that. Brian, I know you're also the main mechanic of your center, and you have a certain passion and drive when it comes to optimizing your equipment. I won't share more than that. Can you share with our viewers some specific projects they could be working on when it comes to pin spotters?
Absolutely. So most of us have a summer maintenance program that we normally put our pin setters and the mechanics in charge of taking care of. Because it's most of the time it's our slower times in the center and we're trying to get things done and addressed before busy season kicks in. So now is the perfect time with the center being closed to get a lot of those things started to where you don't have to worry so much about timing as to when the center is open, you're trying to do them. One of the biggest things is the pit areas. The pit areas, nobody likes to do them. It's one of the worst things in the world on the pin setter to have to do, but it's also one of the key pieces to keeping that pin setter running smoothly. So now's the perfect opportunity to get in there and rebuild the pits. The nice thing is you don't have to rush with it. You can take your time, and if you don't finish it today, you can come back and finish it tomorrow, where you don't get that luxury when the center's open and running. You know, you have to have it done by this time because they need the lanes. So now's the perfect opportunity to really start on those pits and start to get them, you know, really addressed and done. And if you do them right, realistically, they're going to last you a few years that you don't have to worry about them, because the worst thing you want to have happen is have a pit break, you know, during a league or a tournament or even during a busy open bowling time, because nothing worse than not being able to use that pair of lanes. The second thing to consider is flagging your tables and adjusting your spotting cups. That's a big thing. You know, a lot of times over the course of the winter, most of that stuff gets knocked out of adjustment. A lot of times guys let it go till it gets really bad. So now's a perfect time to work on that, as well as rebuilding all your ball returns, thinking about adjustments on those, and the light ball sensors. If you have AMF machines with light ball sensors, now's the perfect opportunity to do those. A lot of times they get overlooked, and you have a lot of ball calls in regards to the lighter 6 and 8 pound balls because you just really haven't put the time into making the adjustments and the cleanliness that needs to happen on the light ball sensors. So really, now's that perfect opportunity to get started on that summer program that you know is going to be starting anyway. If you start doing some of that now, realistically, when summer comes and your business gets back open, let's hope that we have people that have been, you know, tied up in their houses now for 6-8 weeks wanting to get out and go to local businesses. You're going to get them in, and it's going to be hard at that point then to start that summer program. So let's try to get some of that stuff done now, thinking about even keeping top of mind the parts that you might need to do some of these things. Think about that stuff now, get that stuff and start getting it set up, because if you wait until summer gets here to do that, if it becomes that we open later in the season and people start coming in, it might not be the perfect time for us this year to start to do it then.
Oh, that's a good point, Brian. Thank you for sharing those details with us. Along those lines, I hear a lot of questions related to the management and maintenance of the lane machine. And I think Kathy touched on that a little bit earlier. But some of the questions are, should we oil the lanes occasionally while the center is closed? Or drain the cleaner or not? Things of that nature. Kathy, what would you recommend?
I would recommend no, because like I said, I have wood lanes in Sandusky and I have synthetic lanes in my other center. There's just no need to. Like we said, my husband's a total believer that, you know, the oil will just collect more dirt and that could lead to problems later on. On wood lanes, you know, if the oil gets in the wood, it could buckle. You know, there's just odd little things that could happen. On synthetic lanes, you have panels, there's caulk. You just don't want to have any more dirt on your lane than you need to be, because then when you do get your lane machine back out there, you don't want anything to have to go wrong with that as well. Also with your lane machines, we strip our lanes, we empty our cleaner tank, and we adjust our duster cloths as well. I don't know, there's so many lane machines out there, but that's what we do to keep the roller, the duster cloth in the right form. You know, it's those little things that you don't think about because you're constantly using your machine, and here's a period of time where we're not using it. So my opinion would be no, I don't think we need to maintenance the lanes with oil while you're on a downtime.
Okay. Brian, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a 50-50 decision out there in regards to should you leave oil on the lane, should you not? It really depends on who you talk to. With wooden lanes, they claim sometimes it's better to leave oil in the oil area of the lane, because when you don't, any of the cracks and stuff are subject to take in moisture from the air and things like that, which can actually create more problem on the lane than when the oil's on there. So it's like a 50-50 depending on who you talk to. What we've chose to do is, rather than leave all of the oil off of the lanes, we actually strip and oil 4 lanes a week, and the other 8 we leave empty. So basically at my center, only being 12 lanes, we do 4 lanes, strip and oil, and then we remove the oil, and the next week we'll do the next 4 lanes. So we've been doing it, one, not only to leave something on the lane part of the time, but also to get the dust and dirt off, which does happen even with no oil on there. And lastly, even if you drain the oil and the cleaners out of the machine, it's still in the hoses and the pumps. So it's a good idea to run that stuff to get it through the machine so it doesn't harden and dry out and unmix inside of the actual pumps and the lines. So that's something to keep in mind. And for anyone who does have a a lane machine, you should check with the manufacturer of that machine, because there will be some specifics that they tell you to look for and do during this time. I know Kegel put out something very specific in regards to their machines, and I know Cubic AMF has some discussion today in regards to this webinar about it. So I would follow some of those protocols and then just do what makes the most sense for your center. In my case, being smaller, I find it easier for us to just run a few lanes each week and make sure we're still keeping the machine in working order and condition. We just keep very little cleaner and oil actually in the machine itself, but we make sure we're constantly running it through the pumps and keeping everything cleaned out.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's exactly what I've been hearing. There's really no one correct answer. It all depends on your center, your preference, your setup, and what you think is the right thing to do for your situation. Couple of comments and questions came in. Let me address that real quickly before we get too far away from this topic. I think we don't need to leave conditioner on the lane, but one time a week, machine need to be run. Okay, there you go. Here's another opinion as well. Shoes and bowls are two major contact points for customers. Any thoughts of cleaning program, not just now, but also moving forward when we're open again, especially now everyone expects 100% sanitation. John will discuss this just a little bit later, and we'll touch more on this, some options and solutions in the upcoming weeks as we're transitioning our conversation more towards reopening your center and what to do to reopen and what that business model is going to look like going forward for these reasons that you have already mentioned. So sit tight and we'll address some of these things a little bit later. And then also another comment has come in, and I think you guys are reading this back and forth because everybody can see it, but Bird Bowl in Miami, Dion said, Miami is currently under a shelter-in-place order. The mandate states that all non-essential businesses are to be closed and non-essential personnel not leave their homes. I'm hearing a lot of people are in their centers performing non-essential work. I've stopped mechanics from going in on the date the order was passed. Anyone else under the same order who are or are not performing maintenance in their center? And I see that some people have provided answers. This is fantastic. I am the mechanic at BSU. The manager and I are working a straight 40 hours still. That's fantastic. Tons of PM work to do that is essential. You know, Dion, most states are different at this point in time, and I'm sure even Brian and Kathy can attest to this. What we have seen from a lot of our customers is even in those states where their business was deemed non-essential and they had to close, they were still allowed to go in with a couple of different employees. I think, Brian, for Pennsylvania was a 10 and under, right? That had to be, that were allowed to be in the building. So an owner and a manager, a couple managers or a mechanic would still go in and perform some work. But obviously no customers were allowed in the building. So as somebody said, essential is pretty broad. Here in California, we're doing preventative maintenance and telling mechanics to do social distancing while doing repairs. Masks, distance, cleaning. Yes, absolutely. That's what a lot of people are doing. But some other states, and Kathy, you may be aware of this, I think Michigan, they're not allowed to go in at all. So even if your center is closed and you have a mechanic or a couple managers that you kept on payroll, I've heard from a couple of people that they're not even allowed to go in at all. So different states have different regulations and different things they have to go by. So it'd be best to check your local recommendations and requirements to be on the safe side. I hope that answers your question. Okay. One more thing that comes to mind, and I think, Brian, you touched on this just a little bit ago. One area that could probably use some cleaning and organizing would be the mechanics area. This would be a great time when the business is not open to take inventory of all the spare parts and consider what you may be needing for the upcoming projects. Joe, let's bring you in. You're one of our internal experts on this topic. Can you share with us some best practices on what spare parts the center should make sure they have in stock and working?
Yeah, that's a pretty broad question.
Right.
Obviously, you're going to need spare parts for anything you need to replace. As far as what you need, yeah, that's where you need good, accurate records of what you have for spare parts. And I'm a big advocate of some kind of computerized parts inventory system. There's a lot of pre-done packages out there you can get to get you a head start on a database for that. I would invest in one of those if it were my center and kind of get my parts in there and be able to track what you use routinely, how often you need parts, and it also will let you identify easier the holes in your parts inventory that you might need to fill.
Okay. Brian, do you have anything to add to that? I know, I keep on thinking I would hate to start working on a project and then realize I need something that I cannot get right away, and then I cannot proceed with that project. Any other suggestions, Brian? Any comments?
Yeah, the one thing Joe said was in regards to tracking what you use and what you have. I mean, the other key thing is to make sure that you are keeping good detailed notes for each one of the machines. It's a great idea, and any of you mechanics that might be involved in this webinar today know that being able to know when you put that part on and how long it lasted is a great reference point for your other pin setters, because you tend to usually see when you have an issue with one machine, if you've been keeping up a great preventive maintenance program, you can start to look at the other machines if you're keeping your lineage pretty evened out and know that those are going to be issues on the other machines. So it's really a great opportunity for you to also be keeping track of those parts by putting in any notes or anything else in regards to the parts that you might be replacing or rebuilding on the machine. If you are using, cubic AMF scoring and you have the trouble call system, that's actually where I keep all of my logs in regards to everything I do on the machine, and then I keep that running for several years. So I have the ability to go back and see when we put on new parts or done rebuilding on different things on the pin setters themselves, rather than actually keeping it on paper. But as Joe said, there are several companies out there that do have some inventory programs and some maintenance programs that you can get for a PC, but I would definitely be following something that you're keeping a very good close track on all of that.
Thank you for adding that. Another question came in the meantime. Should I be cycling my XLIs at any intervals? Wondering about the wet bearings and gearboxes getting dry patches.
So what I would suggest to you is yes. At my facility, once a week, we actually go through and run the pin setters, again, in banks of 4 at a time, so we're not spiking the electric. But what I actually do is I'll put the 4 machines on continuous cycle, let them run for 5 to 10 minutes, then I'll turn them off and go to the next 4. In addition to that, it's a great opportunity for you to start to make some of the adjustments and stuff that you see that are out of place. A big thing to watch is going to be looking at your distributors, because depending on what your facility is doing, whether or not you're adjusting your temperature controls for heating and air conditioning now since the facility's closed, maybe you're saving on heat or air conditioning, keeping it at a different temperature than what you normally would, you'll notice that the clutch assemblies a lot of times need to be tweaked a little bit. And normally you don't notice it so much when the facility's hot and a lot of people are in there bowling and the machines are running. They might not act up as much, but think about when you first turn the machines on first thing in the morning and you get that weird pile up and things like that during practice of a league that just starts early in the morning. A lot of times it's because that distributor clutch assembly needs to be adjusted a little bit, and you only notice it when the machine's a little bit colder. So now's the perfect opportunity to run those on a continuous cycle. Watch how everything's orienting, if you have the proper movement of the distributor, or if you need to make some of those clutch adjustments. It's actually the perfect time to do that.
Thank you for that, Brian. You mentioned climate control, and Kathy also mentioned that at the beginning. What should that be at a bowling center? I know this is as broad as it could be, because whether you're in Pennsylvania or Arizona, it could be a huge difference, right? But what are some of the things that our proprietors should be looking at when they're deciding what their climate control is going to look like at their center? Kathy, what have you guys been doing?
I believe we've been keeping our thermostats around 55, 60. I mean, it's cold, but the only two that are working in the center are my husband and my brother-in-law. If we were to have other employees in there, we would adjust it accordingly while we had people in the center. Other than that, we keep it very low for obvious reasons.
Sure. Brian, how about you? You guys are not too far away, Ohio, Pennsylvania. It's somewhat similar, right?
Yes, I think Brian's getting a little worse weather than we are. But you know, for instance, today it was snowing. It's going to snow on Friday. So the 55 to 60 degree is going to feel worse on Friday than it might have 3 days ago. So
Yes, so true.
it does vary. I think it depends what part of the country you're in, what kind of weather you're having at that time, how it's going to affect everything inside the center. My sister lives in Texas. I go there. It's freezing in every bowling center because it's always so hot.
Sure, sure.
It really depends where you're at. And it also depends on how that proprietor wants to run his facility. Everyone's going to have a different outtake on, do they want to run their pin setters? Do they want to keep conditioner on their lanes? Do they want to keep their thermostats at a certain level? So I really do think that it's an individual basis. You can throw a lot of information out there, but at the end of the day, I think it's how everybody wants to run their center according to how they want to run it.
True, true.
Yeah, and the big thing is temperature control. I mean, if the facilities are closed, we're actually all running our temperature. You know, if it's winter, we're running it a little colder than we normally would like with guests in there. And of course, as it gets hotter and the temperature increases, we're going to still need to run air condition, but we're going to cut it way back to where it's not as cool in the facility as normal you would have if you had guests in there. The key thing that comes into play with anything really in bowling is the humidity level. You got to make sure that the humidity level in your facility is at a, you know, a standard setting of what you would normally have in there, because you don't want a lot of extra humidity in there for the lanes, and you don't want a lot of dry condition in there because of the lane. So the humidity is actually the big key point there, making sure you're keeping a comfortable humidity point within inside of the facility.
That's a good point. I think that's very important to remember. Bob said it's 53 in the Philly area today. And then John said it's been in the 70s and 80s in Louisiana, and shocked that it's high of 66 today. Well, John, I'm here to tell you it's been in the 70s and 80s here in South Carolina as well. And today we're barely gonna reach 60. So a big difference for sure. Okay, thank you, Brian and Kathy, for sharing that. Jeff asked,
Natasha, that I would say to everyone is just do not turn off your heating and air conditioning system.
Right.
I mean, we want to cut back and save, but be reasonable with your heating and air condition as to where you're running them for your facility, because it still does play a key part even when the facility is closed.
Yes, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Jeff asked, is there any data or plans out there on safety protocols when bowling centers are able to reopen? Jeff, this is something we've been talking about daily at this point in time for a couple of weeks now. We're hoping to get there sooner than later, but a lot of things will be guided by federal and state government in terms of what the regulations are, what you're allowed to do at your center. Brian's been talking about this lately quite a bit. You know, we don't know if they're going to limit certain number of people that are allowed at the center at the beginning. You know how we started, no gatherings of more than 100 people, then 50, then 10. You know, we're not sure if the reverse will be true for reopening. So it's a little bit challenging at this point in time to kind of predict what those things are going to be, and we trust it may be different based on each state. So what we are currently working on is figuring out what is the best way to handle some of these things. If there's still, which we believe there will be, some social distancing elements still present as we're able to reopen, what is that going to look like and how we're going to overcome that from operational perspective, and making sure the facility is clean and making sure that your customers know of everything that you have been doing while you were closed to assure that safety is your priority, safety of your customers and your employees. So we're working on that, and like I mentioned earlier, please be sure to check the topics for the upcoming webinars, as well as our Facebook Live with Beyond the Frame group. We're addressing these things as we go, and we're going to have more content built and developed here before long. With that, I want to quickly recap some of the things that we've gone over because our panelists have shared quite a bit of information. Pin spotters, Brian, top 3 things proprietors could be doing right now when it comes to pin spotters. Don't let me do this one on my own. You know, this
sorry,
is not my.
The pin
Thank
aerials
you.
would be, you know, the number 1 thing I would suggest. Second would be flagging and adjusting your tables. And third, I would say working on your ball return and the light ball sensors.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Kathy, lanes and lane machine. Top 3 things for each that centers could be doing right now.
For your lanes, definitely stripping your lanes. I would be checking your lanes very intensely for, you know, malfunctions, any cracks, feathering, depending on what type of lanes you have. If they're missing dowels, you need any replacement parts or panels on your lanes, your foul lines. Definitely checking your lane machine. I would, you know, like I said in the beginning, I would empty the tank, make sure everything is clean. Don't leave any leftover product. Bacteria can grow. That's the last thing you want to see is any leftover product or old product sitting around in buckets and chemicals in the corner somewhere. That's the last thing you need. I think you just really need to take care of listen, I look at it like this. This is a baby. You need to take care of this like it were a baby. You need to look at it from head to toe and you need to care for it. And if that means you need to buff it and oil it and strip it and take, you know, measurements on anything that you need, even your foul lines. I mean, I go into bowling centers, there's foul lines that really need to be replaced. So you have to look at it like this is a baby and it's a very expensive baby. And you want to make sure that when the crowds come back, you're ready. You don't want to worry about having to fix that later on. I honestly think we could use this as a wonderful time to do the things that we haven't had the time to do before. And it could be something as just looking really deep inside what my lanes look like and what type of care my lanes and my lane machine need.
Yes, Kathy, I agree with that 100%. Like I said earlier, we're so busy otherwise that we just wait for that next thing to happen so we can tackle, you know, major projects. But right now we have no customers, right? So the center is not open. What better time to tackle some of these projects? And also general upkeep of the center. I mean, I will let Joe talk about this here in a minute when he's going to introduce a document that we have prepared and touch on some of those things. But as a lot of us say often, there are always things to do at a bowling center. No matter how busy or slow you are, there are always things that could be done. And like Kathy said earlier, when you show care for your facility and you show effort to do some of these things, your customers are going to see that at the end of the day. I want to go over some of the resources that we have available for you. And instead of just talking about it, I'm going to pull up our Cubic MF corporate website to walk you through some of these pieces. We have created the resources for COVID-19 page. If you click on this little learn more button here, it will take you right to it, or you can go directly to the support page, and one of the first things that you see will be resources for COVID-19. Before I go there, I'm just going to remind you that Cubic AMF eShop and customer portal are available to you 24/7. And the resources available here, we're going to touch on a few things. Beyond the frame, if you access that area, you will find our webinar schedule for the upcoming weeks. For the previous weeks, there's a direct link for you to be able to watch previous webinars if you weren't able to attend them. And then for, as you see, welcome back, getting prepared to open, It's going to be coming up next week, I'm sorry, and we're going to discuss some of these things that have come up today. So this will be a direct link to take you to register for that webinar. And then all of our blog posts that have been made so far, you will be able to find them directly here. And if you have not registered for Best Extras blog, you can fill out this form here, and they will process your invitation right away. The blog used to be exclusive for our Best X customers only, but a few weeks ago we've decided to open that up to all of our customers, as a lot of the content is still being uploaded there that could be very beneficial to anybody regardless of what scoring system you have. So I encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to take advantage of this. And some other set of reference tools that are available to you on how to, for example, when your center is closed, if you have web booking, to learn how to block off your lanes. So if your customers go into your website, you don't look like you're open. This is being updated constantly. New content is being added all the time. And maintain your center is one other area that could be very beneficial. Joe, do you want to go through the content that's available in the Maintain Your Center area?
Sure, yeah. That checklist would be good for anyone to take a look at and run through. We've already touched on a lot of those topics, but a few of the things that are on there that we hadn't touched on so far. Pins, now is an ideal time to go through and take a look at those, check for cracked pins, get those out of the machines, inspect what you've got. Used pins, most centers already have a plan to use those. Your local police station would probably love those for target practice too. So I used to get rid of a lot of them that way and make some real good brownie points.
For sure.
Yeah. House balls and rental shoes, those are probably going to be some hot topics when people do get to reopen, just how we take care of those. So you want to have a good plan for keeping them, sprayed in front of customers with a disinfectant. Our Fresh Care shoe spray is a hospital grade disinfectant and germicide. It's not on the label or labeled that way because of some governmental regulations, but it does function that way. So that's
good to know.
Yeah. I'm sure customers are going to be asking questions about how to deal with house balls as well. So I think you're going to want to find some kind of hard surface disinfectant for those, whether you choose wipes or some kind of a spray. You may want to consider keeping house balls behind, like in some of the centers have done, with a ball and shoe room so that they're a little more controlled. And now while you're closed, it would be an ideal time to go through your selection of house balls. Make sure you don't have any that the core is separating a little bit, so there's no sharp holes or anything like that in the finger holes, and get some of that stuff weeded out. Computers and all of that type of equipment, you probably have all that powered down now, but it would be a real good time to check the battery backups, make sure that they're all working. Maybe fire them back up, check for Windows updates. Usually the cables behind all your computer systems can be a bit of a rat's nest. So now might be a good time to take a look at that, clean it all out, blow out the dust out of all the CPUs and all that stuff, and maybe label all the cables. So if you have to get in there at some future point, they're a little easier to figure out what goes where. If you don't have any type of offsite backup for your data, now's a good time to start thinking about that and consider getting that lined up. Other than that, kind of put on your customer hat and just walk through the whole facility, parking lot, right on through, and try and do it with a different set of eyes, not just dash in and get ready for the day's business, but so you can check everything for, is it cleaned and in the shape it ought to be? With what we might be coming under when we reopen, have you got a way to clean and sanitize things more easily or routinely so that people can see you're doing it?
Sure.
I think Kathy already touched on most of that food and beverage stuff. The marketing portion, yeah, if you haven't looked at it yet and you do have a website, make sure you're keeping the information on there updated. Um, check all of your marketing materials that you're getting ready to go to again. And now's a good time to take a look at what you've done marketing wise in the past and maybe think about what you'll want to do going forward. That one could be a little tough because we don't know what business will look like going forward, but it's still worthy of going through that stuff and cleaning things up and maybe planning a little more now that you have the time to do that.
Yes, that's true. And like I said earlier, in the upcoming weeks, we will have more content and more material available in some of these areas in terms of marketing programs and operational considerations, what your business model may look like going forward after you reopen. So we're working on gathering all of that, and we will be sure to share that in the upcoming weeks. Definitely. Joe, we got a couple more pieces here in maintain your center section pertaining to turning on and off the super touch monitors, safety and care of cubic AMF products, cleaning, all those things. Anything that stands out that you want to point out to our viewers?
Obviously take advantage of those resources if you have that particular equipment. Shutting down, being familiar with how to shut down and turn on your scoring system is really handy to have available. So I would suggest getting your hands on that.
Definitely, that's a good one.
Yeah, there's often a pretty strict sequence you want to stick with. So it's best to get that charted out again while you have time.
Yes, and for me personally, I always feel comfortable when there's a little cheat sheet right next to me. So if I get stuck, I can just glance over and make sure I'm doing things in the proper order. It's a
Yep.
little bit of a peace of mind for sure. Okay.
Yeah. Most of my past centers, I used to have something like that laminated or just in one of those clear page holders and right at the front desk so the staff could always find it.
Sure. Nice. That's a nice best practice. Perfect. Thank you for sharing that with us. And then on the bottom of the resource page, we have direct links to IAPA, BPAA, and SBA resources. Again, all beneficial information. I'm sure most, if not all of you, have already been able to take advantage of that. So if you haven't done so already, like I mentioned before, please be sure to take a look. Definitely a lot of useful information that could be beneficial to you, especially going forward. Quick question I want to address very quickly that just came in. How long does it take for the free upgrade from Conqueror 13 to X? William, that really depends on a couple of different things. The upgrade itself doesn't take very long, but we first have to make sure that your Windows is up to date. So any updates that need to be done there will have to be completed first. And then Brian, is there anything else to consider when it comes to upgrades from version 13 to X?
It shouldn't. It's really going to be a matter of just doing, checking the PCs that are being used in the facility. If it's a newer facility, then that part is not in question. But obviously, if it is older PCs, we just need to make sure that everything is where it needs to be before we would actually do that. So those are just key things to keep in mind.
Okay, perfect. And also, there's a second part of this question. Is there a special paint to use for gutters when trying to touch them up? Joe and Brian.
There used to be years ago. I don't know if that still exists today, but years ago there was a specific urethane paint that used to be used. Joe, maybe you know more if we have anything available like that anymore.
You are correct. It used to exist. It does not anymore. And I would strongly suggest not trying anything you find at the big box stores. Trust me, I tried it once, and it's a great way to pick up all kinds of marks on balls.
All the marks on the balls. Yep.
Yes. So you're actually going to be, in my opinion, you will be better off just cleaning what you already have there and make it look as nice as you can. I would not try and touch up the paint on that particular area.
Okay, That's interesting. I did not know that for sure. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Kathy, Brian, and Joe, thank you so much for sharing, for answering all the questions and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. Hats off to you, especially Kathy and Brian, for working smart and pushing hard through this very challenging time and still accomplishing so much at your centers, as we've seen many of our customers do so as well. With everything going on, I know all of you have been quite busy, and taking the time to share your insights with us and participate in this webinar is very much appreciated. At this point, I would like to ask our participants to send any other questions they may have. I'll give you a few moments to do this. If you don't know already, you may submit your questions using the chat feature on the bottom of your screen. And in the meantime, I do want to read another question that has come in. We've received it in our email that I think a lot of people can relate to. So the customer said, we have now been closed for a few weeks and don't currently have a mechanic. I have 8270's machine and Durabin upgrades. I've been trained on and have done a lot of repairs, but wondering what preventative maintenance I should try and do during this time on lubrication to tables and bowl lifts and front end bowl returns. I think, Brian, that would be best for you and Joe to address.
So the first thing that I would say would be to, if you have your 8270 manual, to look inside of it, and it should actually have a preventive maintenance schedule in it, as well as all of the grease and oil points that need to be taken care of on the pinsetter itself. If not, I think you can get a copy of that manual from the customer portal at Cubic AMF. The other thing to keep in mind is, obviously with doing any of those oiling and greasing spots, would be, it's a good idea to clean that area before doing it to start. Then after oiling or greasing that area, to clean it again, because a lot of times you put a little extra grease on there that ends up coming out of some of the fittings or bearings. So I would just say clean before, oil and grease, and then clean again. And more than anything, make sure you're practicing the safety protocols put in place to make sure that you are, tagging and locking the machine out before working on it, and just practicing as much safety as possible on the pinsetter.
Thank you, Brian. Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't think so. I think Brian just covered that pretty good. Wipe the stuff off, like you mentioned afterwards. A lot of times grease oozes back out, and that just attracts more dirt, which you don't want to restart that cycle. So that's why clean that second time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you both for addressing that. I don't see any questions that have come in, or should I say, it looks like we have addressed all of the questions that that have come in at this time. Brian, Kathy, Joe, oh no, I will take that back for just 1 second. Dave Wilson, we have 2 centers with TMS string machines in Colorado. We would like to do some repairs and maintenance, but don't really have a mechanic currently on staff. Any ideas on where we may procure some help? Joe, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Again, we do have the manuals for those on the customer portal, and that's always a great place to start when you want to take a look at maintenance. The TMS string machines don't take quite as much maintenance as other things, but carefully checking the strings, string adjustments, make sure that they're not fraying, especially where the bushing goes into the top of the pin on those machines. Check that. You may have to replace strings. You might be able to just shorten it a little bit and get the frayed section out of there. Clean the thing out real good, and that's probably about it. Those machines don't require huge amounts of maintenance, so.
True. And if Dave, if you guys run into any issues, or if you have any additional questions, our tech support team is still available. while they're working remotely, they're still taking inbound calls and monitoring their email box. So feel free to reach out at any time. You may also reach out to us at maxtrainingadmin@cubicmf.com. I have that displayed on the screen. So any questions that you may have going forward, or anything else that you may need, just let us know and we'll be able to help you out. Okay? If you have any follow-up questions on that, please do let us know. And at this time, it looks like we have answered any of the questions that may have come in. Kathy and Brian, I want to ask you one last thing. What's your message of hope to your fellow proprietors and our bowling industry in general?
I would say the biggest one is stay strong. We definitely will come out of this. It's a matter of waiting it through. Bowling has always done well with every recession, with every war, with everything that has happened. So this is just another thing we have to overcome, but we definitely will. And I think in the long run, hopefully people after this experience will want to do more stuff locally, and we'll get some of those crowds in, and we hopefully in the short period will start to get back to normal. But hang in there, guys. We definitely for sure will get back to what we know bowling to be.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that, Brian. That's perfect. Kathy.
Yeah, I look at it like this. Even though the centers are shut down, that doesn't mean we're down, that our morale is down. Yes, it's a scary time. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, but I totally believe that our customers are going to miss us as much as we miss them. I think we need to sanitize in front of our customers. I think we need to focus on being better at customer service, welcoming the customer back. And most importantly, keeping in touch with your customers and your league bowlers. Use your social media. It doesn't always have to be for negativity. Use that social media to keep in contact with them. Let them know you miss them. Keep them updated on the things you're doing in your center to welcome them back. Use all the financial resources and be aggressive. It's time to save ourselves. And I think when we all reopen, I think business will be better than it has been before. I think that we can use this as a learning tool to be better in the long run.
Thank you so much, Kathy. At this point, there's literally nothing that I could say that could be better than what Brian and Kathy just shared with you. So I'm gonna leave everybody with that today. Thank you so much for joining us, to our panelists as well to our participants. We appreciate your time. And above all, we hope that you stay healthy and well. As Brian said, tough times don't last, tough people do. We're all in this together. We hope that you join us next week, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.